Hi, everyone. We're going to be doing a Future of React panel discussions. There are going to be some sweet questions and some spicy questions. So let's start off with this sweet question, which is, please introduce yourself. I'll start off. Hi, everyone. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I am a software engineer at Slack. I use React all the time, and I'm super excited for this panel discussion because we're going to be talking about React 19, what's coming up, what we hate, and things about React that we wish we could change. I will pass it on the mic to you.
I'm Eli White. I'm one of the software engineers on the React team at Meta.
Hi, I'm Mofe. I'm another software engineer on the React team at Meta.
I'm Kent C. Dodds, and I teach people how to make quality web applications.
Hi, I'm Theo, and I teach people how to make terrible web applications.
I'm Mark. My day job is a time travel debugger at Replay, and my second unpaid job is maintaining Redux.
I'm Tom. I helped create React, and now I'm the chief product officer at Vercel.
Cool. What a cool panel.
I love you all.
All right, let's start off with a spicy question. React 19 is in RC stage. We're so excited to hear when is it going to be in stable stage.
You're looking at me. I'm looking at you.
React 19 has been really cool because we've really taken a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from people, especially around these suspense changes, if you've seen that. I really want to do a shout out to Andrew from Vercel, who's worked very tirelessly to make sure that bug gets fixed, and we address the needs of the community, make sure React 19 is good for people. That has been incredibly complicated of a change to make, and as we've rolled it out, I think this week, people have started sharing feedback. They're like, oh, this is actually what it should have been all along. This is incredible. There's a couple more bugs that we're working through, and then we hope to get it to be stable.
I have a quick point on this. I regularly am surprised at how many people feel like React is breaking all the time, because the delays with React 19 are a beautiful example of the opposite. They had an RC, it was gold, it was ready to go. A very, very, very small subset of apps that used client-side suspense in a very, very, very specific way had performance regressions. And rather than ship it and tell them to deal with it, they have now taken a long time to make sure nobody's code breaks or even performs worse than it used to as a result of the changes. And I personally think we should take a second to applaud the team for continuing to keep our apps working 10 plus years into these code bases.
Love that. I love that shout out. Actually, you mentioned there are some challenges that you're dealing with. I would actually love to know what has been sort of the most common bug that people have raised about React 19.
That's a good question. Mofe, do you have any ideas here?
We've been hearing a lot of compiler questions. I don't know. I think the compilers opt-in only. We're in beta right now. We're hoping to get a stable release out. So hopefully we love more feedback on the compiler if that's breaking anything for you.
Nice. That's actually a nice segue to my next question, which is going to be, tell us a little bit about React Compiler and what would you like people to know as somebody who's been maintaining React Compiler for the last 2 years?
Yeah, we're super excited to release it. We released earlier this year and recently released to beta. So we love you to try out React Compiler on your app or your library and report to us if it works flawlessly if you encounter issues. We have a debugging guide online. We have an adoption guide. Please try it out. We've been using React Compiler at Meta for Meta's biggest web apps, Facebook.com, Instagram.com, Threads.net. It's out for, we've enabled the compiler on almost every single React component and hook on Facebook.com, which is really, really cool. We didn't need to do a lot of custom debugging. We turned it on and it mostly just worked. We had a couple of end-to-end test breakages that we debugged and we were able to fix within a couple of hours. So we think that, yeah, React Compiler is really ready for the world. We also believe that React Compiler is here to stay as not just an auto-memoization feature, but like a core part of React. So part of this is we think that the future of developer experience and developer tooling will be using the compiler. We'll start by merging the existing ESLint for React with the compiler-powered one that will give you more powerful lint violations. And we also expect to be working on a React IDE that's powered by the compiler. So you get more than just lints. You get educational like tooltips or things that power users might want. Yeah, it's really exciting.
I know Kent said he doesn't like magic, but we've been doing a lot of data science at Meta around the compiler and the rollout, and we've seen pretty incredible performance wins and like top-line engagement wins for a lot of our products across Facebook and Instagram, but also developer efficiency wins. It's been really incredible for our engineers.
I think that's very exciting. You're right. I do not like magic, so I'm cautiously optimistic about the compiler. I hope that it can continue to be. I understand it needs to be a core part of React, but if React can continue to work without a compiler, then I will be satisfied. I'll probably use the compiler, but as long as I can still write the vanilla, then I feel like that changes the design or constrains your design decisions in a positive way. That's why I care. But I also wanted to say, like, did we just get a new editor announcement like here at the conference? That's awesome.
Very early, very experimental.
Man, those editors are coming out like crazy right now.
Is it a VS Code fork?
No comment.
I think we're thinking more like an extension, right?
Yeah.
Like a VS Code extension.
Tom, you wanted to add something?
Well, yeah, I mean, in Kent's talk this morning, he was using create element directly without JSX.
With RSCs.
No compiler needed with RSCs, the latest features of React. So I think the team is committed to making sure that it will continue to work the way that it does.
Thank you, yeah.
You try a class component, though.
I should have.
One question I've seen asked a lot is, when can we possibly expect a compiler interface layer that is not powered by Babel? Something Rust-related, SWC, something that does not require adding like the Babel loader to Webpack?
Yeah, we're working on that plan for next couple of months. We're planning to start working on that.
I wanted to call out something that you mentioned, that when you added the compiler to facebook.com, a couple of end-to-end tests passed. I just want to say you should probably have some end-to-end tests in place when you put on the compiler, because testing matters. Sorry, Theo.
Any library we can use, Kent?
I test my code. I have a hand. I can click.
All right, moving on. You mentioned about the IDE, which I actually saw yesterday, and I was pretty excited about it. But I want to ask this question to the rest of the group, which is, are there any features of React 19 that you are pretty excited to see?
Yes.
Which one?
Oh, I guess I will go. I mean, because I don't use next.js, I haven't been using RSCs for the last year and a half or however long. And so I'm very excited about RSCs being officially stable in a stable release of React. And of course, server functions and all of that entails. I think that there's a lot of really, really interesting patterns that we can get. And what I really love about what React is doing is it's going to consolidate the framework. So I use Remix, Theo uses Next. I think that in the future, our product code is going to look very similar. Almost you could just use them in either framework. And I really love that. React is bringing us back together. Thank you.
I'll pass it on to Theo. Same question.
I mean, this is my whole life. You can go to my YouTube channel, and I've done like a deep dive on every cool thing about all of them. I'd say the one that like I've had the longest journey with has been streaming, like going from seeing the benefit before understanding how it worked at all, to deeply understanding it, to reverse engineering it and implementing it myself, to then seeing the final form of it now. It's been really cool to watch how we've went through this journey of how do we stream HTML over the wire in a way that allows the user to have a good experience. And it's cool to see that puzzle finally cracked in a way that isn't just benefiting React, but not only will it benefit other frameworks on the web, it'll benefit other non-web frameworks and ecosystems too. Like I've been helping some teams in the Elixir world get this working in Phoenix and LiveView as well.
That's why you always bet on React, because we get it first.
Somehow, still. How old is React and we're still the first to so many things?
It's amazing.
One of my favorite Theo quotes is, "Nobody shits on React better than the React team."
Yeah.
And like just even thinking about this is pretty cool, because React has been around for so long and has changed so much, but you're product code can still be so similar to what it is. And that really speaks to the ability to add things to it and add these capabilities, add streaming, and it still is just React. It's what you're used to using. And that's because we see all the flaws, some that you don't see, and constantly are working to improve that.
Yeah, I even went out of my way when App Router in React 18, I believe, dropped to take the oldest example of a component I could find on the React blog. I had to bring in the new class helper polyfill that you guys made, but I could get code from 2013 or 14 running in a brand new 2024 Next.js app with a single package you guys built for this purpose. You can run really old code and really new code, and not just have them both in the same project, but mounting each other and building interoperating between code that's 10 years old and code that you wrote in the way that we're going to next year, and have it all just work together. There is no technology I know of that has maintained that level of interoperability with different generational ways of writing it as React has.
Browsers are incredible.
Yeah, but none of the things interrupt. They all just break.
Yeah. You're composing code from 2013 to 2024. That's insane. It is so good.
Yeah. Mark, what do you think?
My head is kind of in a weird space around a lot of this stuff. I deeply follow what's going on inside of React at the team level and the PR level and even the code level. So I've been thinking about things like concurrent rendering and how that interacts with external libraries like Redux for years. And yet, on the day job, I don't spend a lot of time building UIs myself. And so my own React usage tends to be, the bread and butter, fetch some data, render a list, whatever. And so while I understand a lot of the mechanics, I have still not entirely wrapped my head around some of the newer things from 18, transitions or use deferred value. I think Brian Vaughn tried to explain that one to me a half dozen times, and I still only half get it. So
more than me.
Yeah, it's the hardest hook for sure.
Yeah. So, on the one hand, and sometimes it feels like client-side React was already complete, and so we're getting some things. It's I guess there's new stuff, but what is this? But at the same time, even some of this new stuff in 19 around forms. How many times have we written a use state hook to track the loading state of a request?
Too many.
Yeah. And so having things actually built into React for that are clearly something that is going to help the community.
Yeah, I think you're right. Forms especially has been so ignored for a long time. So it's finally very nice to see that they get the respect that they deserve, and the work that we put in forms is now actually going to be automatically done by React, so we don't have to track all these manual things. I agree. Tom, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just, over the years, there's been this pattern of the React team saying, okay, we don't have an opinion about this specific thing, letting the community explore for a very long time, zero in on a set of patterns and solutions, and then bringing those into the framework and codifying them so that everything built on top can be a little bit simpler. That's what I'm excited about with React 19. I think it continues to do that, and it did it this time with the form stuff. But I think, the commitment to the economic value associated with React is not the framework itself. It's all the stuff we've built over the past decade. So bringing those patterns into the framework and keeping it fresh and keeping things moving forward, that's what I'm most excited about.
You heard it here first. Tailwind is going to be part of React in React 20.
I was thinking animations would be really good. So
Be centralized on an animation solution?
that would be interesting. I just really appreciate that that aspect of React is that we're not going to make an opinion on something until we are solid that this opinion will go for a decade or more. And that honestly was one of the things that really attracted me to React, was the commitment to letting the community just work through a bunch of different solutions. When Flux was presented at Facebook, and we just went through so many different iterations, and
The Flux War.
yeah, the Flux Wars, and there've just been a lot of examples of this where React's we're just not sure what the right direction is. We're going to let the community innovate. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why React leads in so much, is because you don't just have the team at Meta and Vercel working on it. You have the entire community trying to solve these problems, and then we iterate to something that is really, really good.
Thank you to all of you for iterating on that.
Yeah. Clap for yourself.
Something I'll say is like an outsider is I was surprised at how open the React team is to having these conversations. And that's not just because like I'm a YouTuber, they have to listen to me, although that is true. They're looking for this feedback, like random events that Eli shows up to, like he'll just talk to anybody about this. And if you've had a problem with React, you're getting frustrated with the framework, I'm amazed at how quickly a conversation with pretty much anyone on the team can show you how much they do get it and care. I can't count the number of times I've had a conversation where I raised a concern about a design decision or an API I didn't think was going to work, and Sebastian would just rewire my brain in 2 sentences. Like, these guys get it. They've been thinking about these things for so long. The React team doesn't show us what the plan is until they've, as Eli said, I said before, they have been their harshest critic about it for years beforehand.
Yeah. Speaking of feedback, let's hear it. What are some features of React that you feel are kind of confusing or unused, or you would like to see them removed from the future versions of React?
Ignoring the last part, every hook that was introduced in 18 and 19.
One of the things we used to do as a core team was every time the team wanted to introduce a new feature, I would ask, somewhat jokingly, like, what are the 3 features you're removing in order to add this one new API?
I didn't know you worked on Preact.
Yeah, I had, in my past life. One of the good examples of this was get derived state from props. I remember the meeting. I was joking with the team. I was like, all right, what 3 APIs are we removing in order to introduce this one? And it turned out that in the Facebook massive code base, we removed most use of 3 APIs. It was like should component update and component will receive props. So I hope that there's always a sort of like refinement that's happening while we're introducing new things that reduces what I describe as the barrier to entry. Like, how many APIs do you really need to learn in order to get up and running? I don't have any specifics I'd call out that I wish they would remove, but there's a lot of legacy stuff we probably don't need to do.
I think Mofe and the compiler team have helped, pay some of those bills for us.
Absolutely. I'd love to never call use memo again and use callback. Let's let the machine do what the machine does better than me.
Yeah. Anybody else who wants to add?
React is perfect. No. No, I was just thinking about like when create class got pulled away, you managed to still let us use that by having another package. So as things get kind of shifted around and we kind of evolve as a community over time, this is one of the beautiful things about React is that it continues to evolve. It's not stagnant. It's always innovating. And yeah, old things are going to go away, but I would love to still be able to use 2013, 2017 React code in whatever the future is, and I have confidence that the React team isn't going to abandon us or the rest of the community as we continue to innovate and move in different directions. So while it can be frustrating, like, oh man, they came out with classes. Oh, now they came out with hooks. So like, I'm just constantly rewriting React code. But no, like, you don't have to rewrite it. Like, you probably want to. There's a motivation to get there. But I just appreciate that the React team cares so much about that migration.
It's not quite things I would remove, but some examples of things I've seen people ask for that sort of relate to this. Some people have said, we don't have any class components in our code base. Could I somehow have a version of React that omits class component support entirely? I've seen people say, like, why can't I tree shake React and somehow leave out the bits of the core functionality that we're not using? A lot of people, of course, have asked for proper ESM publishing packages, not
please.
just
Please.
And these things all actually relate because, like, the core logic of React is very intertwined. Like, you can't really separate out the logic for updating a class component. It's in its own source file, but the published version, it's all together. So there is no single answer, and I'm not like sitting here begging for this to be removed. But these are certainly the kinds of things people think they're asking for, even if they don't understand what it would take to accomplish it, or realize that it's not necessarily saving them.
How little it actually would matter.
But I will ask for the ESM support.
Yeah, ESM we definitely want.
So I also have a feature I kind of want to remove. So I'm hoping to kill like use memo and use callback, hopefully already now, tomorrow. But there's another feature that like I don't know, just looking at the code, it feels a little redundant. And that's the depths array for use effect. So now that you have a compiler that can understand, like, oh, what are you using inside of your effect? It's the same logic for understanding what you're using inside of your normal React render code, right? Or like your use callback code. Maybe we can just use that compiler and not have to worry about effect dependencies.
So there will finally be a use case for a use effect call that doesn't have a second argument?
Yes.
Because right now it is just a foot gun.
I was telling Theo the story the other day of where that array came from in the very beginning. And it was like hand wave many years ago. It was like, well, don't worry, a compiler will just do this someday.
Yeah, I remember that.
And like 5 years later.
And here we're in a room full of compilers.
We've finally done it.
And Kent will be able to still write the depths array.
I can still do it. Okay, yeah, that's good.
I do think this brings up an interesting question around the education side of things. And this actually very much relates to what I've gone through with Redux. Redux was taught very early on as you're writing all this code by hand, object spreads and action type constants and everything. And so we created Redux Toolkit as an abstraction layer. You're writing less code. It's using Immer for easier immutable updates. It's generating the action creators for you. But you still ultimately have to understand the principles of immutable updates so that you realize, like, I can mutate inside the create slice call, but not outside. There's magic happening there. And so we start to get into the same thing in terms of the compiler or something. Like there's, if someone comes into a code base 3-4 years from now that has been React compilered for a long time, and they see a use effect with no depths array, they might not realize that the compiler is actually doing a lot of work for you. So from the education side, there's still a need to kind of teach some of the underlying concepts and understand that in this code base, there is some magic happening that is saving me time and effort. I don't have an immediate answer for that. I don't know necessarily the best way to, say, like, organize the React docs. For the Redux docs, what I ended up doing was the primary tutorial teaches Redux Toolkit and says there are some bits of magic you need to know as we go through. And then there's a separate fundamentals tutorial that teaches the underlying concepts with no abstractions. Maybe some of that needs to be integrated in the React docs, not sure, but it is a concern.
Sounds like you're well employed for a while, Kent.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I would love the React docs to have that. That is my modus operandi, or die, I don't know how to pronounce that, for how I teach React is like, let's strip away all the tools. That's why I was using create element and stuff. Just strip away all the tools. What is the core of it? And then, all right, now you're a professional. Let's add some of the magic to make this work efficiently.
It's not quite the same education that you're talking about, but I think we also think about how do we teach these new AIs and LLMs the new patterns. If we make changes, as we want to remove use memo and use callback, how do we get the LLMs to stop prompting those things? I have no idea, but that's going to be something we need to figure out.
I think we have to drink a shot because we just said AI.
Hey, we made it so long without.
Yes,
I'm proud of us.
Exactly. Actually, speaking of... okay, we're drinking a shot.
Yeah, we are.
This is non-alcoholic, I promise.
I do have a somewhat hot take. I actually don't want most people that get started with React today to ever have to learn use memo or use callback. So I believe there's like a short transitionary period where from now to next, you need to learn like from here to there. But after that, I hope that we've established a new baseline that doesn't require it. So I would actually invert the docs. I would say don't teach it by default and then disclose it progressively if somebody happens upon it.
Yeah.
But heard about the if I enter a code base that's like relying on behavior associated with the tooling, it could be confusing. But yeah, I think the whole goal is to make it so that we introduced concepts to get us from point A to point B, but eventually point B is the new starting point.
This is one of the things I've seen a lot with React that's like really interesting is like a community management problem where React is allowing us to build things that are so complex that you can have a full life of a career all in building React and learning all these complexities and details. And then an update comes out that doesn't get rid of those things, but allows you to not need them anywhere near as much and to work with more pieces, but the puzzle that you build with it is much simpler. That said, when you're so used to living in that specific complexity and something else gets added, it just feels like more complexity, and it can be really stressful as a person who's like dedicated their lives, like creating materials, documentation, frameworks, libraries, and all of these things around the way React works today, that when we look at React of tomorrow and it's different, it's hard to map the mental model. And something I found interesting with like server components is they've been easier for me to teach to non-React devs than long career React devs, because when they see JSX, they assume that's a client component that is re-rendering all of the time and all of these things. But if you're treating it just like HTML and you're not that deep in the React brain, it's easier to learn these new ways of using it. And one of the concerns I have with the compiler is that the people who are so deep that they know exactly where and how to use their callbacks and memos are going to be thinking too much about what the compiler is doing and not just trusting it to do the right thing.
React IDE.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, both of those takes super good. I hope you were listening. We had the same thing with hooks. I remember before hooks, I spent like the first half of my workshop teaching people how classes work in JavaScript. And then I would
teach me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a couple of years. I don't know if I can do that anymore. But yeah, then we got hooks, and everybody who'd been doing class components had to unlearn all of that stuff, whereas like brand new people just picked it up a lot faster, and it makes tons of sense.
I got in as hooks were happening, and I think it's a huge part of why I got like as into React as quick as I did, because I didn't have the baggage of the old way of doing things. I could just learn the new one. My first one of those moments was server components, and I did not like them initially.
Kent, actually, I have a follow-up question for you, which is you've been teaching React for a long time, and I'm curious, what are some things that you've seen people trip over the years that you would like to change?
It's been almost a decade now. And it's evolved, of course. Like, I used to have to teach people classes, and now I don't have to. So the question is, what do I hope I don't have to teach them in the future?
What are some things that people get tripped on in React?
I mean, of course, like infinitely running effects, calling set state inside of the callback. That doesn't happen a ton in my instruction anymore, but there are definitely some places, because React has gotten so good, and Epic React v2 is all React 19, so we're not using useEffect a lot. Which is awesome. But then like memoization is something that's confusing. Use deferred value is a really it's a hook that's not for a specific use case. It's for like it can do so many things, and so it's hard to really like. I've got examples, and here are all the really good places where you use this, but like it's still kind of a hard one to communicate. And that I think trips me. I confused Ryan Florence on a card drive with the use deferred value. So I don't know. I did my best. I think. A lot of the challenges that people are having are morphing their brain into the new way that things are. People who are learning it now, like we said earlier, are getting it better. Sorry.
So I have a question for Kent too. So Kent, you say you don't like the idea of like magic, but what do you think about having an IDE that could kind of show you like, hey, this is another way that you could write this feature? This use memo, it's not really necessary because it's already being memoized in the same way that you want it to be, or maybe even better.
To me, that's good kind of magic. Yeah, I like that a lot because it's instructional, and I think that we all depend on a lot of magic. I don't know how my computer actually works. I have like some ideas about transistors and whatnot, but like we're building on top of abstractions, and so at some level there's some magic we're depending on. That's fine. And I think that the compiler can just be that next level, and then we're all just operating at this, utopia level. And when you really want to understand things better, you go down to level up, and that's one of the epic programming principles that I'm going to be talking about. But so I'm cautiously optimistic about the compiler. I think there will be a transition period where we're just trying to figure out, okay, where is that magic level now? But I think that I'm really excited about the IDE. I think that'll be a sweet extension.
Mark, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, something that ties into both the thing that confuses people and like the education moving forward side of things. The number one mistake I see people have with like the React mental model is not realizing that when React renders a component, it will recursively re-render every child component inside that by default. It's how React has always worked. And a lot of people have assumed over the years that, oh, my child component only re-renders when its props have actually changed. My most useful liked blog post is a 12,000-word article on React rendering behavior. And a lot of it was just, I keep seeing people ask these same questions or make these mistakes over and over. And so the thing about the React compiler is it does actually flip that default behavior on its head. And for the first time, React will truly only re-render your child component when its behavior change, or when its props actually change. And so, like Theo was saying, like those of us who've been using React for a long time do actually kind of need to flip our understanding of this system.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a very brief addition. Magic is only magic when it works 99.9% of the time. When it works 100% of the time, that's just the way things work. We don't think about the fact that the light that's shining us right now is magic, absolute magic. And the first time anybody saw it, it was magic. But yeah, I think once we get to the place where the only thing you have to learn is the way that things are intended to work, then you can eventually progressive disclose. You can go down to go up, et cetera. But I think it will feel like magic for a little while, and then we will take it for granted in the best way possible.
I just had this in my talk. I should have prefaced my talk about streaming with, by the way, I'm about to go into all the nitty-gritty details on how this works. You don't need to know any of this. You shouldn't have to know any of this. And I forgot to say that. And I ended up getting a bunch of questions on how to debug these specific behaviors. I'm like, you don't have to. It does actually just work, as crazy as that sounds. And accepting that and trying it and not worrying until you hit that bug that makes no sense can make a lot of these things much more approachable.
I have a spicy question, which I'll start off with Mark, just for a safe bet.
He's the safest one to answer a spicy question.
Yes, at least this one, not Tom. Okay, here it is. React has become dependent on frameworks like next.js for some of its recent features. What do you think about that? What is your opinion on that? And how do you feel about React featuring or favoring some of these frameworks?
It's less about me having opinions on it as me being just inside sort of the not quite inner circle enough to see what's been going on. So I'm going to sort of like put I'm not a Facebook employee, but I'm cosplaying one hat on. You know, the React team was always able to like alpha and beta test features using Facebook Meta's own internal infrastructure. And so since Facebook has their own server infrastructure, server components were the first feature where they really couldn't do that. And so between, you know, maybe like trying to spread some of the React knowledge and ownership outside of the one company, as well as Vercel wanting to, you know, like the React team convinced Vercel to buy into their vision, but also Vercel was willing to put their money where their mouth was and pay the employees and rebuild Next, et cetera. So I understand some of the community concerns and complaints about, you know, Vercel's trying to sell servers or whatever, but I also understand that it made sense from a development perspective, from a, you know, like company progress kind of perspective, and, you know, ultimately they needed to be able to build these things and try them out.
Can I give the spicier version?
Of course.
Next was the first framework to go all in on RSCs because Next was the framework with the by far worst ergonomics around routing, layouts, and data fetching by like 10 miles. It was so bad. And it needed server components to work for it to be able to exist in the next generation, much less compete in it. The other frameworks tried. Hydrogen tried real early, too early, and suffered a lot because of it. Remix tried, was unsure, and had like back and forth about it. Now they're going in. Next was the one that needed it the most and was also the most willing. And I think that's why they got picked, more so than like they spent the money or whatnot.
Yeah, and I would say that they picked themselves. So like it wasn't like the React team said, okay, we're going to pick Next. No, it was more, hey, frameworks, we need some help like trying this stuff out. And Next was the one that had the resources to do that. And also, I suppose, the motivation as well. As I was on the Remix team at the time, and Ryan and Michael and I, well, mostly Ryan, put together a demo of what Remix can do now and what RSCs with Remix can do now, and it wasn't there yet. And so, and with such a small team, we didn't have the resources to dedicate to getting it there, and Remix was pretty good at the time. It still is. So yeah, I think that's kind of what factored in. But I'm super stoked to get RSCs in React Router v7 and Remix.
Yeah, I think one of the things we realized working on React at Meta, we reached the end of what we could do with a client-only architecture. We really needed to bring the server into the picture. And Facebook benefits from having control of both the client and the server. You can send different payloads down. You can invent a new serialization scheme that can magically serialize promises over the wire, which is just insane. But you have to have control or influence over the server infrastructure and the client to be able to do it.
And the bundling as well.
That's right. And so I think Vercel, the idea that you could have managed infrastructure that you end up building in tandem, so you have very high cohesion between the managed infrastructure and the framework, I think positioned it uniquely to be able to sort of chart the course a little bit here. But the ideal is that highly cohesive managed infrastructure and framework is loosely coupled. So other frameworks work really well on Vercel. Remix runs really well on Vercel. And the managed infrastructure can be used to power anything from Python to PHP to any JavaScript you can bring at it. But I do think that you need to have influence over both the server and the client to sort of like achieve the next milestones we're trying to achieve.
Can I just throw one thing in there? Because
Yep.
Dan is always asking me to say this. You don't have to use a server like at runtime for RSCs. So it's fine, but you probably should.
Mofi, did you want to add something?
I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Final question, just before we wrap up, is for anybody who's new to React, what tips and suggestions would you give them to get started with React?
Go read the official docs tutorial.
Yeah, +1.
It's so good. And just build things. Don't get too lost in all of these details. Don't try to learn how all of these new features work in entirety. Most of us, the people here who work on React, don't fully understand these features. You don't need to learn all of React to be a React dev. You need to build things with React to be a React dev.
Mm-hmm. Isn't anybody going to plug Epic React? Dang it. Yeah.
Mofi, Ellie?
I mean, I'm supportive of our docs, so.
Docs are great.
Cool. All right, folks, any final thoughts?
I love these guys.
Same.
Where do I go to get more information about React IDE? I believe I've been not included in some meetings recently.
I want to say thank you to the community. Like, this is something that's pretty unique for React, is like, thinking about our partnership with Vercel and other companies like Microsoft, like React is so much bigger than Meta, is so much bigger than the constraints that we have. This would not be the community that would be here, the events that would be here, if we weren't all working together to push these things forward. You don't want the constraints of Meta. You don't want us to push, make you all use PHP for server components. And so we need to work with the community. We need the extra constraints, and this makes React better for everybody. The education, the influencing on YouTube. All of this is what makes the community. And so thank you for your contributions to all of that.
Well said.
And thank you to Eli for continuing to push this. I know it hasn't always been the easiest at a big company to be like, yeah, we need to bet on this open source thing and this community and have these events and do all this stuff. Like, Fang doesn't love that, and you're pushing really hard, and we do recognize it. So obviously, round of applause for the community, but more importantly, to Eli and to the whole team for making all of this possible.
Woo. On that beautiful note, thank you so much for joining this panel and for your spicy and sweet takes. And thank you, folks, for joining us and being part of the audience.
Thank you.
Thanks.